Okay, and we are back. This is the FLT podcast. And on this grey and cold day, we're here today once again to talk about Finnish leadership. Today is a bit different, as Mark, our usual welcoming host, with his angelic voice, is not with us today. But no worries, this is just temporary, and Mark will be back in no time. We have done quite a few episodes up to now, and one thing that we realized is that most of our guests have been of Finnish origin. And in general, there are not that many leaders here in Finland who are not originally from Finland, but who managed to build their successful careers in Finland as entrepreneurs, executives, and leaders. So we really wanted to find someone with such profile. We looked around in our networks, and based on several recommendations, we found exactly a person we were looking for. It's a great pleasure to have you, Reggie Rusan, with us today.
Thank you.
Welcome to our podcast. And how are you feeling?
Feeling fantastic. Glad to be here.
Excellent. Well, as usual, we have prepared an introduction for you, Reggie and Anneli. Would you be so kind to introduce our guest?
Of course. You have a degree in computer science, and during your career, you have worked in several US cities and London, Brussels, and now in Helsinki in European Union.
Mm-hmm.
This combination of skills made you unique as you were able to bridge the gap between technology and business. Throughout your career, you have held various roles from software development to executive leadership. You are good at managing large-scale projects. You are also known for your ability as a leader to foster a culture of innovation. You worked at KONE as the global head of IT operations for 15 years when you decided to jump off the hamster wheel for a couple of years to take care of your son and seek for employment. However, you noticed that your international network was of little value in Finland. You had to build your networks from the scratch. The networks in Finland are tight, and Finns do not have a natural need to broaden them, especially with people who do not talk Finnish and do not have the usual Nokia background. You did not give up. You found your network through Shortcut, an organization which helps immigrants to find jobs and set up startups. You also served on the board of Finnish Entrepreneurs Immigrant Network, the British Commonwealth Chamber of Commerce of Finland, and the American Chamber of Commerce, AmCham. Now you are the founder of Simple Tech Solutions, which sells data protection, outsourced technology, and IT management services, as well as helps companies achieve GDPR compliance. You are also the Chief Commercial Officer of eSystems Nordic, an IT consulting firm. Is this a good description of you, Reggie?
Yes, fairly accurate.
And when was the last time you tapped into the help of your networks, and what did you ask them for?
Interesting question. I think in Finland, you use your network always. Your network is really an investment. And as we were talking before we started to tape, I think my network is always working for me like a good investment. So, which is one of the reasons why you guys reached out to me.
Yes.
So, which is good. I would say one of the current activities I have going on is I joined a group called Boardman. They have an international group and maybe another pool that you guys can choose from to talk to other international executives that are seeking board level positions in Finnish companies. The board positions I've had so far have been for kind of nonprofit organizations or chambers of commerce.
Right.
And now I'd like to kind of add value more formally to Finnish businesses.
Excellent.
So always I'm tapping into my network. So
Is it easy to build a network in Finland?
For me, it wasn't really difficult. I received some really good advice when I first started to pop my head out to say, okay, now I'm in Finland, and my CV is not going to get me where I thought it would. I
Hmm.
need to start really talking to people. And one of my good friends told me that, about this value of network. And I think you should take that a step forward. Not only do you need to have a rich network here, but you need to build your brand. People need to understand, why would you call Reggie? What is he good at? What can I get from him? How can he help me? And so, and you should be communicating that through your network, but you need to be building your brand as strong as you're building your network. It hasn't been extremely difficult for me. I know that there can be some challenges. The shortcut, which you mentioned, really kind of set the tone for giving me an understanding of who I should talk to and how I should approach things, and sitting down and being more methodical at networking, and
Right.
not sort of the haphazard kind of approach that I think others take. And then also giving me the awareness that you're building your network continuously, and it can be everywhere,
Mm.
not just when you think you're building your network. So
Right.
I always had this impression that building network means that you're supposed to go to all kinds of social events, drink a lot, party with right type of people. Is that is that part of it?
I enjoy that part of it. I'm not going to run away from that one, but it isn't. It's also, I mean, all sorts of interactions. My son was when he was playing hockey in the Espo area. Quite a lot of the senior IT leaders, at least their kids, were going through that program. And so, I was sharpening skates like the rest of the dads. We weren't out drinking and having a good time. And so you never really know, when you're going to have the opportunity. And quite frankly, I think you should turn it the other way around and just say all opportunities are available to extend your network. So,
Mm. What do you think about bias and networks? Because I mean, networks, of course, open doors to those people who
mhm,
are in the network as
yeah.
well. Any thoughts on that?
Well, we kind of talked about that networking in Finland can be, networks are very tight knit,
Mm.
which, they have the inherent biases built into them.
Right.
And definitely it's strong here. But I have noticed that, I tend to equate Finns to be very tribal. You guys don't look at yourselves that way, but your networks are not just networks, they're tribes.
Mm.
They're really there to enrich and protect the livelihood of that tribe. And so, and once you get into that tribe, those sort of demographics that may have looked as barriers before aren't there.
Right.
So, but you have to get in, and you have to show that you deserve to be there for the right reasons. And then I think they break down quite rapidly.
Mm.
So, but being a Black person,
Mm.
I face bias every day.
Mm.
It
Mm.
is just like the rain you mentioned. It's part of the environment. It might be sunny one day. Everybody thinks, oh, it's cool. And then the next day, it's heavy snow, it's raining, the wind is blowing at 20 kilometers an hour, or second. So
Mm.
again, that's one of those other things that I just expect, that life comes with bias.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
is it right? No, but
Mm.
that doesn't change. I don't,
Yeah.
at least everything grows when it rains. So there's some positive about that. I'm not sure I understand the positive to bias, but it's there.
Mm.
Love it or
Right.
hate it. So,
Right.
Well, there's no bad weather, right? It's sometimes you're just not properly dressed.
yeah, yeah. No, I do like that sort of Finnish proverb, if you will. There's no bad weather. There's only bad clothing.
Yeah, exactly.
So yeah, you need to arm yourself and be prepared for it. And so, and then when you do that, in my opinion, you look at it from a different perspective. So I like sometimes the challenge of showing people that their biases are completely invalid.
Mm.
So it's
How do you do that?
by trying to be a good example that counters
Mm.
this thought, and I don't know if this topic is taboo or if I'll say it in the wrong way, but there's been several times in my career when I've been told that I'm not Black. Right. And,
Mhm.
and when I analyze that, what the person is actually saying is that I don't fit their bias. right? Because they have a bias of what being Black is.
Right.
And because I don't fit that, then I'm not, it's not that their bias is wrong. I'm physically not Black, which is really ludicrous if you think about it. So people's cognitive dissonance is so bad, they cannot accept
Right.
that I'm breaking their mode for what this bias that they particularly have.
Right. Right.
Yeah, it's very similar to quite many of my experiences when I was told that I don't behave like a typical Russian.
You're not Russian.
Or you don't look like a
how's that
typical Russian or
possible?
something like that.
You don't sound like you don't. Yes, and that's the unfortunate things with biases. People would rather hold on to their bias than say, "Hey, maybe I need to look at my bias."
Exactly.
Which is where the problem is.
Yeah. And even though bias is so inherent, and everyone has.
Yeah, everybody. Yeah. Even I have biases. I try to fight them, but I know they're there.
Yeah, exactly. So. Yeah. Did you, Alexei, have some questions?
Yeah. Well, since this is about leadership, maybe a natural question would be to ask you about your leadership kind of approach. How do you see your leadership kind of beliefs and your philosophy?
I really like kind of the reverse pyramid approach. I really believe that I work for my people; they don't work for me. So I had some really good training early on in my career, and studied a gentleman by the name of W. Edwards Deming, and he always sort of says that leadership sets the tone of the organization. And I've had some situations where maybe my tone wasn't so appropriate, and it showed up in the people that were on my team. And that actually hit me harder than if you were to give me the feedback directly, I probably wouldn't have resonated. But let's say you were on my team and you expressed this bad behavior, and that came from me, then that made me want to change those behaviors stronger than I would have. It would have just been my own issue to deal with. So I really think that leadership is just a member of the team. And, we all have a role to play. And that's why I try to, kind of facilitate. One of the other principles that Deming has is that the role of a kind of leadership is to clear roadblocks and make decisions. And so, we clear the roadblocks for people so they can get the work done. And that's the sort of, leader I've always tried to be, is that I want to work with really good people. I trust what they do. And it's my job to make sure they can do what we brought them here to do.
So when you moved to Finland, actually, so did you have to adjust your kind of leadership approach in some ways?
Not so much, because I moved to Finland after I left Kone, which is a bit different. So, I've been working for a Finnish company for 15 years. And so I actually was adjusting my leadership style and continually adjusting my leadership style, but adjusting my leadership style when I was working for Kone. And that was I would say a good proving ground, because we had heavy senior leadership was Finnish, but I would say my level and below was very diverse. So, being a global company and been over all of the local and global infrastructure, I had people in several different countries. So it allowed me, I think, to not necessarily use it as a test case, but have real training ground for how to lead a diverse team. And so I had to definitely change my style. So
can I ask you about the diverse team? There's a lot of research on that. Some of that sort of controversial as well.
Yeah.
But I was just digging out from my book that is coming out in December.
Congratulations.
This is an not paid advertisement. That especially the gender and ethnicity diversity has been studied. And there is a study which Eli and Thomas have done, where they were sort of questioning the McKinsey outcomes of that diversity is, it correlates with financial, good financial outcomes for companies. And they were trying to replicate that and see if it's true. And what they found that is that the company really needs to work for making their either gender or ethnic diversity to work for the company and add people add value and And the point there being that the company needs to learn. They need to be open, perceptive to learn and get educated, open to have these dialogues with diverse people. When you led your diverse people, of course, you being a Black person yourself, so was that easy for you, or did you have to, as a leader, somehow pay special attention that everybody was included?
I didn't have to pay, in my opinion, I didn't have to pay special attention to that. We'd have to ask my team to see if that weren't true. But luckily we had sort of natural items that led us to all of this diversity, because we had country-based
Right.
diversity. But even we were doing what I would call hardcore IT stuff, which was infrastructure related. And I had, several of my key leaders, including my global leader for data centers, was a woman. So I was doing, women in tech long before it had a name, and it wasn't. There was no selection of the person because they were a woman.
Yeah.
That was definitely the right person for the job. And even my country-based leadership in North America, both the U.S. and Canada were both female. And again, we had to do all of the infrastructure management in those countries as well. And so it wasn't. I think maybe because I'm a minority, I just don't think about I wouldn't want to work for a company that was just full of Black people either, or Black men. That I don't see as, there's nothing natural about that. And so I was quite happy that we were able to have all of this diversity in a much more natural way. And I don't think any of my teams saw it any different because, we had Luca in Italy, we had James in UK, whatever, or Etna in Canada.
Right.
Those things were just sort of natural. The key learning for me was that even though I had this nice global multi-ethnicity and all of the demographics, I still managed to fill it with a lot of people who thought like I did. And that was at a point in time, I learned that was also something that you need to mix in with diversity.
Right.
Because even though I'm American and you're Russian or you're Finnish, we could have the same exact thought process. And so our diversity is not going to be enough to get all out of each other that we really need.
Right.
And when I'm looking to hire people now, I actually want people who not only are ethnically diverse or whatever, sexually diverse. I want to make sure that they're not following always the same thought process.
Right.
Because it becomes very, kind of tunnel vision if that thought process is the same.
Yeah.
And I'll give you an example. We did some communication training, and how I determined that I had built a large team of people who kind of thought and communicated the same way I did is because when we did the mapping, sort of along this Myers-Briggs stuff, we all came out with the same profile, or very close.
Yeah.
And we had one or two outliers that were really diverse. And one of the outliers came to me after one of the breaks and almost in tears. Hey, I need training. And I go, wait a minute. Why do you need all of this training? I need training to be more like you. I'm like, no, that's not the point. We need training to be like you. What we don't want is this huge density of people who all think about the same way. And I said, do you ever wonder why sometimes I just pick up the phone and go, hey, tell me what you think about this?
Right.
And then she's like, no, I don't know why you do that. I'm like, because I know you think different than I do. And I know that the idea that I have is only half baked because it's my idea. It's nobody else's. And I need to get the input from other people to make it more well-rounded.
Right.
And you need these people who are going to contest you. They contest you because they think different.
Yeah.
Right. And they're not contesting you because they want to be the fly in the oil or in the soup or whatever. It's because their thought process on how they attack things are differently. And that's the sort of diversity I think we all need.
Yeah. And I think the sort of the company's enemy is really groupthink.
Yes.
Yeah. You cannot differentiate or innovate within that kind of an environment.
Yeah. But is it, I fully kind of agree with you. On the other hand, it's a very kind of, it's a human nature, right? We don't want to hear different
Yeah.
opinions.
Yeah.
It's the same here in my work, that we tend to hire people who think like us,
Yeah.
right? And then this kind of minimizes all kinds of conflict. It makes it easier to manage the team
Yeah.
and so on. And I think it takes a lot of kind of self-reflection, a lot of work on your own kind of thinking process and so on, to be able to actually do what you're suggesting. So how do you develop that kind of skill, that you're able to see value in
I would, that part I cannot tell you how it came to me.
Mm.
Other than the fact when, I had a colleague that I really believed in, really trusted, and I was on vacation, he was sitting in for me. When I came back, he got really negative feedback, and I was just gutted. I'm like, how is this possible? Because I've been promoting this guy throughout the organization. And then when I heard the feedback that he received, I'm like, oh, that kind of sounds like me. And it's funny that people would accept those sort of behaviors from me, but they wouldn't accept it from other people. And so that was the only sort of kind of aha moment that I had. I had other people, that there was a guy that I used to work with at Kone. Sometimes I worked for him, sometimes he worked for me. And he was another, what I would call, a good sparring partner. And sometimes I'd get off the phone with him and we would hang up. I mean, we would have a real knockdown, drag out argument. And I would be in my office, and then, just fuming. And then 15 minutes later, I'd go, Brian is really trying to tell me something, and I'm not getting it. Yeah, he's trying to tell me something. He's not just, contesting me. He's really trying to get to me, and I'm not hearing it. And so I call him back up and go, hey, you're really trying to tell me something. What is it you're trying to tell me? Because I'm not getting it. And then we would have a very constructive conversation on this, and we would make whatever it is we were working on much better. And he would do the same thing for me if I was reporting to him. Okay, you were trying to tell me something. What am I missing here? I'm not getting it. Because like you say, the natural thing is, when I present you something, I want you to accept it. Right? I want my idea to be the grandest idea, that it's bulletproof. There's no holes in it. And, of course there's holes in it. And, because we're having this conversation, I trust that you're going to tell me what's wrong with it. I don't want to hear it, but I want you to tell me. So I didn't have any training that picked, that sparked that. I'm not sure how it happened. I'm happy it happened, because I think it makes me much better to have people that I can trust, that are going to really kind of keep me on the straight and narrow.
Right.
So, and I can help them with the same, in the same way.
That's a great example. I mean, who wouldn't love such a sparring partner? Fighting, and then
it ends up being fun in the end, but the let's say the first 15 minutes are a bit rough. And again, trying to keep that now the negative part of it out of it as much as I can today. And I haven't had so many difficult discussions with people like I used to. So
where do you stand on this kind of inclusiveness in decision making? Like, differences of opinion, sure, but how inclusive should you be when you make a decision as a leader?
That's I don't think there's a right answer for that. I think, again, the studies have shown that being inclusive enriches the outcome. And you should be inclusive for, again, lots of the right reasons. Doing it because it's the corporate direction. Yeah, that works, but it doesn't produce the best results. You got to really want to be challenged, and you really want to get the value out of this other way of thinking. So if you don't, then you're just going to make life uncomfortable for the diverse person in your team, right? That's what that means.
Yeah.
Okay, and with this kind of approach to leadership, so how does it fit into Finnish work life? How do you feel about that?
At Kone, when I was there, it was really a period of globalization. So when I started, we were kind of 25,000. When I ended, we were kind of 55,000. So, doubled in size. And we were really pulling in all, kind of building one Kone as much as you possibly can. And so it's I would say, harder to say, but I'm happy to be involved in that sort of growth period. And with the Finnish leadership team, even the board and the executive committee was diverse when I was with Kone. And I think one of the things that I, at least from my experience, they're the largest Finnish company I've ever worked for, and one of the largest that are here. But I assume Nokia, Wärtsilä, these other big companies, if they have a geographic dimension, they have kind of a diverse leadership team. And what I think is not talked about enough in Finland is that we all view that Finnish boards and Finnish executive teams are only Finnish, and that is not true. Kony had never had an only Finnish, fully Finnish executive board when I was there, or an executive leadership team. Maybe an executive board, but not the executive leadership team. And so I think there's more diversity than maybe we give it credit. And I remember I spoke to Jussi Herlin once in a conference after I had left Kone, and this was about sort of the internationalization of the workforce in Finland. And I asked the question, the larger Finnish companies have been taking advantage of internationals forever. Nokia was a perfect example of that.
Absolutely.
Right? But no one ever told the story. And no one ever tells that Kone has recently been telling the story, which is good, and I applaud them for doing that. And I think their leadership team has become more and more diverse. I know Ashish, their CIO, is from India and came up through that team, which is good. But outside of the business community, the average Finnish person thinks that Kone is run by Finns. And that's not true. It's run by ethnically diverse executive board anyway. So maybe the actual board is different, but and I assume all of these other large Finnish companies have the same sort of setup, but it isn't being discussed that way. And so it appears that it's, the Finnish way. And yes, there are some Finnish stereotypes to leadership and just being in Finland, like there are for Americans and Russians and every other nationality. But I never felt in Kone that it was, at least definitely in the early days of working for them. In the later days, there was a more strong move back to Havinka, which we kind of talked about before we started to record. But during the most of the time that I worked for them, it was very diverse. And for E-Systems I work for now, we have a smaller leadership team, and there's we have one Finn, one Russian, one German, and one American. So it's hard for me to say it's a Finnish leadership team because we have one Finnish person on the leadership team.
Right. And for the audience to know, Hyvinkää is one of the sites where Kone is located in Finland.
Yeah.
It's the cradle of civilization.
Yeah, otherwise known as, yes.
Hey, in my intro, I spoke about you being known as a leader who fosters a culture of innovation. What does that mean? And what is that? And how do you do that?
Well, I appreciate the accolade. It's probably the first time I've heard it. So again, I think it's only about working with people and trying to get the best out of them and trusting them. I believe in this paradigm of continuous improvement beats delayed perfection. So I would rather it is that I actually don't mind when we make some mistakes as long as we're learning from them and we're continuously improving. And so I think that in itself is what fosters innovation, because people feel free to innovate. They feel free to come up with strange ideas, and they usually are not going to get me to say, "Oh no, we're never doing that." Okay, hey, if you think this is the direction we're going in, then let's put the effort into that and see what happens. And so I like that style, of course, keeping risk in mind, but if you have to believe that you don't own all the good ideas, and I definitely believe that about myself, and so I want people to foster these ideas. Again, my job is to remove the roadblocks so they can do what they need to do. And that is maybe how I foster innovation, is because I give people freedom to take the directions that they think that we should go in.
How do you make sure that you hear those ideas and those, innovative nuggets?
It comes from the desire not to micromanage. And so truly, if you're working on task X, I've had people in my career not want to report on what they're doing. And I've had to tell them is that, I want to hear what you're doing, not because I want to even give you direction, but what's going to happen is I'm going to go into the executive board meeting and someone's going to ask me to make a decision to do something. And guess what? I'm going to make that decision. And it may or may not be the decision you want me to make. And if we're not aligned, then I'm going to make the wrong decision for you. So we need a level of communication, but it should always be around, yep, now I know what I need to do so I can remove that roadblock so you can get done what you need to get done. So I'm always sort of listening for, what do I need to do to help this person get done what they need to get done?
Yeah.
So
yeah, I would have needed that kind of a boss.
To me, it's only working. And one of the downsides is that sometimes because of this, people think that when I'm actually pitching my idea, I'm kind of coming down off the mountaintop with the tablets. No, I'm expecting you to tell me where it's wrong. Give me some feedback or to to do this. I'm not prescribing that. Yep, this is what we want to do. This is for us to discuss, and I want to hear what you have to say. And so, but again, if you think about what do I need to do to help person A get to position Z, right? Because that's what the company said we need to do. So how do I help them do that? So I have to be listening for what they need. And I kind of learned that the hard way. So I'd go into a meeting, make a decision, and then get beat up by my team when I got back. Why did you do this? Because I thought I was making the right decision. Because maybe we should have talked more about what we were doing so I could have supported you better.
Yeah, and that was something that when we did the inclusion survey, that was something that surfaced very strongly, was that people felt their leaders weren't listening to their or involving them when they were making decisions. Not everybody wanted to be involved in every decision making, but just listen to those people who had some view on or a point of view on certain important topics, and that came up every time.
Yeah. I think it's one of the most important things, not just, it's definitely for inclusion, but just when it comes to managing your people, is that you think that you're listening to them.
Yeah.
Right. That if they don't, then if you don't have that level of trust, then how can you have any more trust in that? So it to me, it's the foundation. So.
Yeah, I've been in a few situations with a few leaders where there was a lot of listening, but then in practice, the decisions were already kind of pre-made, right? And then in the end, in the longer run, it created this kind of frustration among people that, yes, there's this kind of ceremonial listening to you and so on, but that in the outcome is always the same. So the leader actually knows what he or she wants to do, and then it's the ceremonial kind of listening is just part of the process, maybe to keep you happy as an employee. Yeah. So how do you make sure that actually there's no kind of this gap between, listening and the actual decision making?
I think you can only do what's in your span of control. We all have to implement decisions that have been made without us or without a large group listening to them. So, and it kind of needs to be communicated then when, these are things that I can impact and these are things that I can't. And so it's, I think a lot of times people don't understand, what's the span of control of leadership, depending on where it is in the chain or where the decision is coming from. And so I tend to, even now, I go off and investigate certain things because we have a small sales team. And marketing isn't my forte. So as an example, I went out and because someone called and said, hey, I knew the person through my network. maybe we can help you with some marketing activities. Okay, let me hear what you have to hear, what you have to say. And kind of halfway through, it dawned on me, I should have had more people from my team listening to this.
Mm-hmm.
And so then immediately I try to pull them into, hey, here's what we are. Coupled with, I was just kind of picking up the stone and turning it over to see what was under it. I didn't have any kind of preconceived ideas as to where we would go with this. And I didn't know what it was going to produce. But now it looks like it's going to produce something. So I need to get everybody else's opinion on this as well, or at least the relevant opinions. So yeah, how do you keep the gap closed? I think you need to be self-reflecting and always thinking about, what you're doing to promote this environment, right? So it's not just lip service.
Yeah.
Right.
So, but we do make mistakes sometimes.
Hey, is Simple Tech Solutions is your startup, right?
Yeah.
Did I understand right? How was it to set up a startup in Finland as as not being a Finn?
It was, like everything in Finland, it was well documented on how you should do it, and I think getting it started was the easy piece. Finding customers was the difficult part. And there's really lots of support for starting a company here, far more than you would find in the US, and including financial support. Up until the point in time where you need to monetize or you really need to start making money, then the support kind of moves away, which I think is a bit of an issue. But I'm sure that's a different podcast. But starting a company was easy. It was really the kind of the real slap in the face that I didn't have a real network when it came time to get customers.
Right.
And that was sort of how all this network business happened, and I needed to get busy doing that and building my brand.
Right.
So that was, but the starting process I think it doesn't require a lot of money. It and obviously it didn't kind of grow really big. It's sort of on the back burner now, because I took a position with E-Systems and and doing well there, and like working for E-Systems. So, but I encourage people to start companies.
That was actually my next question.
Yeah.
Now you seem to be, well, we know that you're doing a lot of work and kind of offering support to foreign people kind of coming to Finland and trying to do business here. We also know that there's lots of studies that actually, despite of the fact that this is the happiest country in the world, it seems to be quite selective for whom it's a happy place, and a lot of foreigners do feel not very comfortable here in Finland. So, what do you think is the key challenge for Finland or for foreigners in Finland? Where does this country go wrong?
Okay. So we are taping, so I'll be true to my nature. The problem of foreigners finding their home in Finland is not the foreigners' problem. It's this lack of wanting to let people in the tribe, or even recognizing that you have a tribe and that you are actually being exclusive versus inclusive. And so, we know that Finns speak English better than Americans, in my opinion. So that is not a problem, but it's thrown up as a problem in most cases. It is, like all of these biases, in my opinion, are hereditary. We learn these behaviors as a kid. My ex always tells me, not always, but told me how they played a game as a child of who was afraid of the big black man. Right. Well, what am I? I am he. Yes. So, so it makes sense that these biases exist, because in a very, what I would call innocent way, these biases get formed. And so I think we need to do a lot to break down and to re-educate people on the biases are not valid. When we talk about this entrepreneur thing, there's lots of statistics out there, and Finns are very, love numbers and love statistics, but the good statistics don't surface. So, I always tell a story that in the capital region, 1 in every 3 businesses that start here started by an international. right? It's the fastest growing segment in really in Finland. Finns aren't starting as many businesses as you were before. And immigrants typically will start businesses, become reluctant entrepreneurs because they can't get hired in any other way. And so, and it also, what may surprise you that, there's well over 15,000 immigrant entrepreneurs in Finland today. And these are just the entrepreneurs. It's not the amount of internationals that Kone and Wärtsilä and Nokia hire. And no one is telling the story of that impact. And, of the 15,000 entrepreneurs, we represent 3.5 billion in GDP every year. That is a huge figure.
Absolutely.
But the common thought is that we're all here to suck off Kayla, right? And we're not here to add positively to the success of Finland, which there's a large majority of us that are. And I get asked the question a lot of times, why are you so why is it so important to you where Finland goes as a country? And I have to remind Finns that I have a son here that's Finnish, right? He's half American, half Finnish, but this is his home country. So I have a vested interest in the country that he belongs to. So I may not have been born here, but my roots are here. I don't even have roots in the US. And so I think that these sort of thoughts, most Finnish people don't believe the international community comes in with.
Right.
Right? We've chosen this as our country. We've chosen it for a reason.
Yep.
Right? And so we definitely want to make Finland a better place than it was. Not for me, I'm at the tail end of my career. I want to make it a better country for my son. Right. And most people that I know who plan to stay here long term, they have very similar feelings. But no, when have you ever heard this discussion?
Yeah. And that number that you were
Right.
sharing.
And these numbers that I'm sharing.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly. Yeah. And the funny thing is, my colleague who I'm writing the book with, she said that many of the Finnish really big companies, big names, brands were established by immigrants, right?
Yeah, by immigrants.
Stockman, Paulig,
Sinebrychoff.
Sinebrychoff, Finlayson, Fiskars.
Yeah.
All set up by immigrants. Yeah.
The other statistic I like to quote is that for the last 10 to 15 years, Finland would have a negative population growth if it hadn't been for immigration. I know this isn't a political podcast, but in my opinion, any government should be focused on how do they enrich the tax base of the country. And that Finland needs that more than it needs anything.
Absolutely. And the investments.
And a lot of investment as well. Yeah. But when you bring investment, if you don't have people who can perform the work, then the investment is not good. And I will tell you that how strong our bias is in Finland. I know of a Finnish startup that was started by a Nigerian woman. They received a check for 35,000 euros from the EU, from an EU program, and they could not open a bank account in Finland, and they had to give the money back.
Yeah, and this is what I also heard from the people who came to work in Finland for Nokia, was that if we would like to settle here and build a house or buy a house, get an insurance, all that is extremely difficult, made so difficult that, they chose to move somewhere else.
Yeah. And it's okay for some of these difficulties to be there, but it shouldn't be impossible.
Exactly.
Right? When I moved to London, to open up a bank account there, I had to have a letter from the managing director of Kone's UK business. Right? So it wasn't necessarily an easy process even there, but it was possible. Here's the process and you can make it happen. Just know, even though you have residency here, we will not let you open up a bank account and we will not accept this. Unfortunately, it's a paper check, which is not so common in the world today, but these stories exist. My banking experience was completely different because my network, I won't go into the details, if you know the right people, you're able to have access.
Yeah.
Right. Once you're in the
Smoothing it out.
tribe,
Mm.
you have the full access.
Yeah.
So
do you feel like you're in the tribe now?
I'm in. Luckily, I'm in several tribes. Am I in enough tribes? Probably not.
Are you in the right tribes?
I'm in some really good tribes. I do appreciate the tribes that I'm in. So, and I try to open access up to everyone. I'm on a kind of a personal mission to connect everyone with everyone. If that's what we need to do here, then let's get busy doing it.
Right.
So,
Exactly. Maybe do you have like a kind of piece of advice for somebody who is considering Finland as a potential place to open a business or come to study and build a career? What can that be?
those segments are completely different.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. So, if you come to study here, if you're not building your brand while you're studying, then, unfortunately, you probably won't get hired. If you're building your own business and it's a white collar service, you need to be building your brand and building your network as much as you can. If it's a blue collar service, then those are much easier for people to buy services from.
Right.
So, one of my favorite immigrant entrepreneur stories, there's a company called All Rounders that was started by 5 Sri Lankan guys. And they came here as refugees and they started out changing winter tires. And they morphed that into a over 10 million euro a year business, cleaning Helsinki, Turku, Oulu, Tampere buses and theaters and stuff like that. Huge success story.
Wow.
Never hear about it.
Yeah.
All right. Then thank you very much, Reggie, for this really interesting discussion that we had, for your insightful reflections on your experiences and sharing your experiences with us. And hopefully it sends a positive message to people out there. And, it is possible to do business in Finland.
And survive in Finland.
And
survive in Finland without Finnish and Nokia background.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. I do not speak Finnish, so
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Reggie.
thanks.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Okay, so this was Reggie Rusan with his great stories and experiences that he shared with us. So, Anneli, what are your reflections?
Well, I knew his story because his story is featured in the book that I write with Hannele Mennala. And I think he's very brave to tell his story as a person of color in such a small country as Finland, and coming out with his lived truth, lived life of his about the Finnish networks and how hard it is to get into those networks. And actually what I paid attention to is he called these networks tribes. And a tribe is something that needs to survive, that needs to lock out the enemy, needs to be very careful who you let in and also who you let out. And I thought that was knowing his story and hearing his story, I think that absolutely described the way he perceived those networks that he tried to approach and tried to become part of as a foreigner in Finland. And I really appreciate him being so bold and so open about these things, as it's difficult to be a foreigner in Finland. It's even more difficult to be a person of color in Finland.
Yeah. Well, I can actually connect to this point of Reggie about kind of the importance of networks and the fact that whatever networks you have from your previous life before Finland, they do not really kind of carry any value as such. It is true that there's this kind of public discourse that, in a way, Finland is based on merits, but to a large extent it's not true. It's a lot of things happen here through networks, through relationships, by knowing the right people and so on. And and his story exactly shows that, how he struggled with that. But the good news is that, well, he managed to overcome that, right? So also his story, I think, illustrates quite nicely the resilience that he has. He's a really strong person, and he managed to overcome all the challenges that he faced here in Finland. But yeah, a lot of us kind of who are foreign to Finland, who are not originally Finnish, can relate to that. And I think that's a great inspiration also to learn about his story, to kind of then reflect on your own situation and see that, well, it is possible. Well, it takes some struggle, but there's a way. And then, of course, the way he talks about diversity, the importance. well, that's something that many of us could once again pay more attention to, like how things are done in decisions that we make and people make in Finland and organizations and so on. That diversity is important. And well, we had a little bit of this discussion with him about the value of different opinions, like almost like confrontations in a team. You might look at it differently, of course, but I think, well, he has a strong opinion that this is a good thing. And I think what's important for me is that, well, we should be aware that this is actually a good thing, right? And maybe consider that more.
I think the main point is that when it's safe enough, you can do that.
Yeah.
But if it's not safe and people are not feeling safe or feeling well, you shouldn't, or you should be absolutely very careful about it.
Well, but I guess that's a lot of leaders, not only in Finland, do feel kind of threatened by, by different opinions and so on. And I guess what we take from this is that should not be the case.
Yeah, exactly.
And then, of course, this branding. I mean, we might like it or not, but that's important for all of us, not only for foreign people in Finland, but in general. That's how the world works today. We need to pay attention to, how we present ourselves to the world if we want to build career, be active in this professional sphere and so on. And then it comes back to networks and relationships and so on. So, and definitely based on Reggie's story. So that's one way to cope with kind of integration into Finland. And if somebody wants to do that, one should pay attention to, the branding stuff. Well, but that's, a lot of valuable insights. I think underlining all of this, I think there's a positive message. I think there are some challenges in Finland, but it's in the end possible to, be successful in Finland also if you're not originally from Finland and you don't have a Nokia background as well.
Exactly.
Even that
is also one sort of a bias.
Yeah, but well, with that positive note, thank you very much, Anneli, for today's conversation.
Thank you, Alexei.
Thank you, Bella.
Thank you, Bella.
And Mark, wherever you are. See you next time. And thank you, everyone who listened.
Thank you.